Hello, Jamie, and hello, everyone. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shada Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co host. Here is Jamie.
And hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already, I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect, and I've got tons of experience working with large organizations in the data and AI space. As a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So, with that, as always, let's dive in. What do you got for us today as far as an opening quote of the week?
Well, Jamie, this week was actually full of earnings, right? So, last 1 week, there has been a lot of earnings. Companies are revealing the results of the previous quarter. So, let's talk about that, as far as the AI is concerned. So, let me start with the quote from Andy Jassy from Amazon, right? And here's a quote from him. It is true that we could be growing faster, if not for some of the constraints on capacity, unquote. And Andy Jassy said that during the Thursday's call with the analyst. And before that, the results from Google came, and a few days before that, the results from Microsoft came. So if you look at the AI is actually included in the cloud revenues for all these three organizations, and the cloud revenues for all three of them landed actually a bit lower end of the guidance, or slightly missed the estimate. And of course, the Wall Street, as usual, punished it. And but Wall Street is Wall Street. Sometimes I just don't understand how they work. Um, Sometimes, it's just crazy that like you need the high revenue, you need the high profit growth, and you also need very low cost. That's the Wall Street expectation. But you need to choose at least two out of three, right? You can't have all three. Now, so what happened was that the cloud revenue is slightly lower, but all three of the companies, they actually talked about that they could do better if they had more capacity, which means that they have also talked about that they will actually invest a lot more in the capacity building. For example, in 2025, the Amazon AWS forecasts roughly $105 billion in capital expenditures. Similar amount from Microsoft was also now, like I think 75 or $80 billion. And same thing was Google. They also are massively increasing the AI spend. Now, that left me wondering that, okay, so all that deep seek rethinking, is that all for waste, right? I mean, everybody was punishing Nvidia about, okay, we don't need as much GPUs and all those things. And I'm not sure. But here is also a distinction. Remember that what DeepSeek showed us was about the training cost. Does that also translate into execution cost? It's hard to say right now. Will those kind of optimization be possible? Hard to say again. Um, but what it clearly indicates is that the demand for the GPUs remains solid. The NVIDIA's H100 and all their, the latest GPUs, they still have long wait list, and this is despite all the hullabaloo about, the capacity and the GPUs demand going down, and NVIDIA lost largest amount of the capital in the market in the history of the stock market in 1 day, right? Um, and here we are talking about the capacity constraint and more of the GPU's demand. So I found that interesting and very contrasting from the last week's discussions.
Yeah, and it's definitely the one thing that I read out of all this is that there's definitely pent up demand, and there's not enough infrastructure, not enough capacity to meet those demands. And that flies in direct contrast with like all those market fears that we had, whatever it was, seems like it was an eternity ago, but a week and a half ago around like, you know, we don't need this much hardware. We don't need this many GPUs. And what does that have on, a market capitalization of these companies? It doesn't seem founded, let alone, for the fact that I have seen some reports. I don't know whether or not they're totally true, not yet at this point, but the cost to actually do the deep sea training was way more than what was reported. I've seen some numbers as high as $1 billion. But that aside, again, it goes back to the earnings calls. I think everyone that reported, whether it was AWS, Google, Microsoft, it all seemed to be along the same lines that there's more demand than capacity, and that just kind of speaks to the things that each of these companies are putting time, money, and resources towards to actually build more capacity out to meet the demand. And I think that's just going to keep on growing.
Hey, Jamie, I thought that you are pretty good with the chips. I got my soldering iron here. Why don't we create a GPU and start selling? It's like
I
there's
know.
an spend on it.
Get
Any
get
contracting would work.
get part of the market so we can start making some billions, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I can salvage some of my old chips and then we can put up something.
yeah,
By the way, that's another actually, I mean, there is a lot of innovation happening. We only a lot talk about and a lot is being talked about in the circuit generally about the LLMs and models. But then, there is a lot of innovation that is happening actually in the underlying layers as well. NVIDIA is not the only one. There is a company, the Cerebras, that we talked about earlier. There are still, again, others as well who are still trying to do a lot of innovative things. Cerebras has taken a different approach. NVIDIA's approach is, of course, everybody knows, but there's a lot happening underlying as well because, of course, there is a huge market there.
yep, very true. So on to some news. I mean, other than what was reported by some of these companies last week, but there certainly was no stopping some of the news around DeepSeek. This seems to be the one that just keeps on giving. So there's been a lot of fears around data leakage, obviously because it's a Chinese company that's behind DeepSeek. And there were a couple of states, I think Texas was one of the first ones that banned, from a government standpoint. But there's actually a push right now at the U.S. Level. There's two U.S. House Representative folks. Uh, I might be mispronouncing his name, but Gottmeyer and LaHood introduced legislation to ban the Chinese app or DeepSeek from government devices, obviously citing national security concerns around that. So the act is actually called No DeepSeek on Government Devices Act. Go figure it. They're obviously not really good at coming up with catchy names, but it really emerged to squash some of the fears around those potential data breaches and whatever potential surveillance, if there was any surveillance, by the Chinese government based upon DeepSeek. Uh,
You
we
know,
had
the
seen, I was just about to say, I mean, we had seen last week, I gave a quick little demo on using DeepSeek on Azure. So, I mean, if there really truly is fears of data leakage or surveillance, that doesn't happen if these models are put on either your local hardware or run as models as a service on something like Azure. So I think a lot of this is educating some of the lawmakers on what is and what isn't data that could be leaked based upon how some of these models would actually run. But that's a totally different story. I kind of cut you off. Go ahead.
no. I mean, that's a valid point, and in fact, I think the Chinese angle is what really triggered this massive, I would say, fear about the information, whether it's real or not, nobody knows. Um, but I think DeepSeek knew that this could happen. That's why I think it was a smart move on their part to actually make it open source so that it can pick up the traction. Imagine if it was a proprietary one, a closed model, and only available within the Chinese geography, what would happen? Right? Nobody will be. But I see the same trend. Like a lot of customers essentially are trying to block it. They are concerned because people love to experiment, and the employees, they just want to try that as well. And a lot of companies are trying to block it. While on the other hand, there are companies who are still experimenting. They're trying to see why can't we contain it. Like Perplexity has provided a way to use it within the confinement. So I think there are still ways in which it can be done, but I think it's just that fear mongering. But on the other same line, Jamie, that AI being weaponized and become a tool and the weapon, is true, right? I mean, in fact, Google also just recently they actually dropped their from one of their charter that they will not have their AI being used in any of the, like as a weaponry, and they dropped that, and which created a little bit of the objection from their own employees and things like that. Um, but I think that's across the board as a trend that every company is realizing that it is inevitable that AI can be and should be used. In fact, and that's what we can see. The companies taking side on that as well.
Yeah, I had seen the announcement or whatever you want to call it from Google regarding how their AI could be used in I'll call it military aspects. And again, it goes back to like with DeepSeek. I think that's the rooted issue here with this potential legislation is like the fear of escalations in terms of these country to country tensions on what would be potentially either security or privacy based issues um, with the use of those models. So moving on to another topic, which you talk about Chinese companies, certainly talking about DeepSeek, ByteDance, who again, if people don't realize, ByteDance is the parent company of TikTok. They made news not for TikTok, believe it or not, but for an AI project called Omni Human. So if you haven't seen this, this is actually a model that they introduced, and it is for creating videos. And the interesting thing about this is it can create videos that are very lifelike off of single images and just small clips of audio. So unlike other models that are in the market, think of Sora. This thing can actually generate full body animations. So like me waving my arms, all that,
Hmm.
syncing to the voice with facial expressions like smiles, frowns. And can also do that not only with speech but also music. So it is an interesting model, and I'll bring this up to the stage that you can see this is their homepage, but if we'll have show notes in here that you could hit the actual page, but they have a lot of demonstrations on their site on at least I'm going to say this tongue in cheek at least what they say they're able to produce. And the reason why I say that is they put out this page. It's on GitHub. They also put a research paper out, but there is probably 15 or 20 different video examples. And the one that's making the rounds, and you probably may have seen it already, is Albert Einstein with a video, him talking, about some topic or subject, but it was literally just created off of a small set of images. So it's very interesting in terms of what at least they're showing on their website because it's very compelling. It looks really good. I looked at just about all of them because I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing. So, as an example, I mean, other than Albert Einstein, they have TED Talks. So, literally, they took an image off of somebody and had a TED Talk. Obviously, they gave it the content. So, it just talks and shows the hyper realism that is there within these videos. So, behind the scenes, you can read. I didn't definitely read through the whole white paper, but these models are trained on 19,000 hours of human motion, which supports these various different body proportions and these aspect ratios. Again, some of these demo videos, they actually show headshots, 3/4, full body, and it looks real, which is a little scary, which takes me into a secondary comment around this. It is around deepfakes. I mean, if this is not available yet, by the way, if I didn't mention that already, it's just a white paper, and talking about ways that the ByteDance actually created this model. They say it's eventually going to be released, but obviously, when this gets released, to me, I would be worried about various different deepfakes because seems like a very sophisticated model, and I do know that companies, whether or not it's Google, people throwing up videos, or Meta, if you're just putting out something up on Facebook, they are developing tools to detect deepfakes. but how good are those deepfake tools? That would be my concern, especially as these video tools, whether or not it's omni-human or iterations of Sora or anything else that's out there. So take a
Yes,
look at it. It'll be in the show notes. I, Let me know in your comments if you're as impressed as I am around this. But to me, this one kind of came out of left field. Yet again, another model advanced by a Chinese company.
this reminds me of Vasa One by Microsoft. Isn't this is very similar thing, Jamie?
Yeah, it is. But the thing with that model, which we talked about probably about 10 or 15 episodes, that's only headshots, and you can get really good facial expressions, turning left, right, with the voice, and it's based off of, again, literally you can give one image, but this does full body and even puts it to like music videos, which you'll see on the site. So it's impressive, but yeah, it's similar in nature. Again, I'd have to read the white papers and the way that they're actually building these models, but seems like similar technology, at least similar output.
Cool. And of course, OpenAI is never behind. They sometimes they feel like they're competing against the whole world. So there is something else that OpenAI also launched. It looks like every week something comes out of them. So
Yeah. Yep.
they launched
Um,
a new agent called Deep Research,
yep.
and this is essentially it's like a new feature. You can say, you can also say that it's an agent, or it's of course it's a specialized model, right? So this Deep Research is going to be as a feature available in the Chat GPT, and it basically is designed to conduct multi-step research tasks on the internet. So the way it works is, you give some query to it. You say that, okay, hey, tell me about how, for example, I can do, as you can see on the screen, that, okay, like how the retail industry has changed in the past 3 years, and then give me the entire report, right? And then it's going to go for probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever time it takes. It's going to go back and then create a massive research. And that's not just a compilation of bunch of links and things like that. It's actually going to do analysis, and this is powered by actually their reasoning model, O3. So it's a
Yep.
reasoning based approach. It's not just like search a compilation.
Yeah, and I think that that's the important part here is that this is not just. I'll draw a conclusion to this. This is not just perplexity, right? This is actually using agent or agentic concepts in the background to actually do this research, and it could independently go out and find relevant information. Not only does it find it, but then it analyzes it and then synthesizes it such in a way that this is almost like a PhD researcher in your pocket.
Yeah.
And it pulls that from hundreds of online sources. And the functionality obviously here is that this can query and pull back and provide you information with clear insights, but also the citations for where all of that information came from. Now a couple things pop into my head here around this, because I think this is um, pretty groundbreaking, and I'll talk about the humanity's last exam in a second or two. But what I just said about having a PhD researcher in the pocket, in your pocket, think about the capabilities here, and think about the industries, whether it's healthcare, or if I'm doing some things like financial analyst, or in this case talking about retail. What would you have to pay to have somebody do that research? I'm going to throw a number out here, and the reason why I'm going to throw that number, you'll figure out in a second. Do you think it's going to be more than $200? Oh yeah. You're probably talking thousands of dollars for somebody to do that research.
And the time.
So
Forget the
yeah,
time it takes.
exactly. So what the reason why I mentioned that is that this deep research, this agent that's part of OpenAI now, it's only available as we speak through the OpenAI Pro subscription, which is $200. So if you're a company or an individual, let's say if you own your own organization, you're looking to do some research on launching your new product, is $200 well spent? Hell yeah. you'd spend, at least 10 times that, if not 100 times that, to be able to get that level of depth. So, when you peel this back, underneath the covers, yeah, there's agentic capabilities working behind the scenes. It's using the reasoning model. Um, the research itself, there was extra training that was done to do reinforcement learning based upon browsing techniques, and also going through a multi-step trajectory based upon the data that it finds and needs. So it's doing all this through that O3 reasoning model.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Jamie. However, so did you already subscribe to the Pro yet?
No,
As
but I'm very close to doing it.
you're getting tempted by every week, right? Every
Yeah.
time a new feature comes and they only drop it in the Pro subscription, I think you're tempted to do that. What would be the first topic would you like to use for the deep research? Because I'm very excited to use it as well.
So I'm dabbling in launching or building some software. I don't want to give my topics away or my ideas, but yeah, doing some research on how that could be used in the total addressable market for some of that concept or idea. But yeah, that's literally how I'd use it. I mean, like I said, a PhD researcher to go in and do all of that research that, I either don't have the time or the expertise to do it.
Exactly. I think that's actually one of the best use case to do it, right? Preparing that, understanding that market. But how how can I just trust simply what OpenAI says, that okay, yes, everything that it will have will be reliable and trustable? How would I know that as a user? So I think it may require a little bit of, let's say, like people will try, they will test. I'm pretty sure that's the beauty of it. People would have already started trying it out, and people would be very very happily hunting for any the defificiency. Right? So we will find out soon, I think.
Well,
If
yeah,
people are finding
and a
under.
point and a point on that, like the level of comfort that someone has. So what? Um, and again, I can't speak for firsthand experience. I'm only going by what I've read and what I've seen. Some people post, as well as what's on the OpenAI website. But the deep research actually comes back with a detailed report with clear citations, where it's getting its information from, summaries from those different sources, and then providing it back in its research back to you. So there seems to be support for trusting what it's doing. Again, you have to go back and read it. You don't just um, you um, plainly just trust it. You want to trust with verification, but it's providing that level of detail or depth. Um, Another side comment about this: there seems to be always this leapfrogging, and to me, maybe OpenAI put this out based upon what was going on recently with DeepSeek R1, but um, Google did put out a similar tool. By the way, they have the same names, which is kind of baffling in my mind. Like, call this maybe something else than deep thinking. I mean, deep research. But Google has something called the deep research agent as well, or deep thinking. So it's a separate tool, sort of like Notebook LM. Again, if you haven't used it, definitely go back and look at it. I know we again talked about it a few episodes ago. But so you're seeing a lot of similarities. Where you're not seeing the similarity is the level of sophistication that's coming out of something like this deep research tool from OpenAI. So you can see on the side of the screen here, the humanities last exam. So I won't get into all details about this, but this is an evaluation tool that helps to determine the level of expertise within these models. And there's, you know, there's thousands, there's actually 3,000 different questions and short answers that a model would have to answer. And it's not just one subject, but a range of subjects, right? So if you look at just take GPT-4o, and everyone thinks that's a great model, which it is. The ability for that model to accurately answer the humanities last exam, 3.3%. So you're like, oh, we're way away from AGI if you just think about that, right? And go up the stack a little bit. O1, raise the bar a little bit. We're still in single digits. O3 mini high, it's a little bit better, 13. But are we anywhere near like AGI based upon that? No. But if you look at what this deep research, and again, it's the agentic pieces. So there's more behind the scenes than just using the O3 mini model. Obviously, behind this, you kind of think that it's probably we know it's powered by the more powerful O3 model, the bigger, I'll call it the bigger brother to O3 mini. So this thing scored 26.6% in accuracy. That's a huge jump if you just think from where we were with GPT 4.0, which is not that long ago when that model came out, right? To where we are now with 26.6%. And even compare that just to the DeepSeek R1 model, which was just last week, that's still 9%. So this thing like blows everything out of the water, and I wish I had a crystal ball, but how close are we to AGI with the advancements that we had just seen within the last 2 weeks alone? We're that much closer. Now, I'm not going to say it's within the next year, but the back of my thinking is, are we near AGI within the next 24 to 36 months? I would say so, based upon looking at these things. And if we continue at a pace that we're progressing in, I think it's probably nearer than what most people believe.
Yeah, and I think this is also like deep research. Of course, it takes longer time to think. It's not keen to just produce a result, unlike the GPT 4.0, which it wants to do as soon as possible. This is, I think, a really like you allow a little bit more, right? It goes back to that test time compute, that inferencing kind of model where you actually increase one of the dimension, which is the time, and then you get actually much better because you're allowing the time for it to test and check and then pivot to the reasoning. So it does all of that, right? So it's a reasoning. It is based on reasoning. So it is going to analyze the information, then it's going to reason, and then it's going to pivot. It's going to change the direction, and that's why it takes time. So I think it's fascinating. I'm actually, going to be very interested in utilizing this for some of the research, particularly because we do talk a lot about the business and the trends, and I think this is a fascinating tool for that kind of research and the presentation. People who have used it and who have like shared their experiences, some of the influential leaders, they have actually talked about that it does produce insights which they as an expert also did not think or know about. So it really has raised my curiosity as well, and I'm going to be looking forward to try it.
So potentially smarter than a human is what I'm hearing.
That
So,
even I think GPT 3.0 is compared to my level.
yeah. So kind of moving on and kind of bridging this gap as we were just talking about, this OpenAI deep research model. OpenAI is not the only one that just announced models this past week. So Google actually launched new AI models, and also brings, quote unquote, thinking the Gemini actually released part of it. So what they actually did release is a slew of models to their Gemini 2.0 set of models. So they actually released three new models: 2.0 Flash, Flashlight, and Pro. And these are available on the Gemini API through the Google AI Studio, as well as through Vertex. So these models certainly provide with additional capabilities over the Gemini 1.5, higher rate limits, better performance. There's also simplified pricing in this as well. And obviously the Flash or the Gemini 2.0 Flashlight is the most cost efficient model. And it's also optimized for large scale text output as far as the use cases. One of the things with the Gemini 2.0 Flash, it includes native tool use, but also increases the token context window to 1 million tokens, and also provides for multimodal input, has image and audio output features, which are expected soon. Not there yet, but it's soon to be there as well. Let me just bring up a slide to maybe show some of these kind of differences. You'll see a lot of coming soons on the image output, the audio output as well, um, and some of the other features that are associated with it. Probably one that's gaining more attention is the Gemini 2.0 Pro. Again, experimental because it's basically experimental is sort of like in that beta format. And this is the update to Google's most advanced model. And this is really meant for the most complex coding and complex type of prompts. Um, there's again that larger context window that I talked about before, and the ability, as I mentioned already, for upcoming text output. Or sorry, supports text output, but the upcoming image and audio. There are some interesting feature enhancements other than that image and audio. Um, there's planned for multimodal live API connections as well. So again, no shortage of what's coming out from these different vendors and Google, just like OpenAI, and it seems to be accelerating their timelines a little bit. I think that would be from the outward or outside pressures from those other companies outside of the US.
Yeah, and JP, the context window that shows up here, right? 1 million and 2 million, which is of course massive compared to the models, for example, OpenAI provides, which is like generally in the range of 120K or 200K. I don't think that this massive increase that Google tried to capitalize on made really much difference. I think the companies, if they have bulk of the information, very large, they're anyway using the RAG model and the other techniques to really, append the information. I think this token window, context window, do you really think that it makes a huge difference?
Uh, um, in specialized cases where you might be trying to put in a whole bunch of um, information to search across, and you don't have to do that RAG pattern. I haven't necessarily seen it move the needle where customers or organizations are saying, "Oh, we don't want to use the OpenAI model, or we don't want to use fill in the blank or whatever model." We want to go with Gemini model because it has 1 million or 2 million token context windows. So I haven't seen it play a huge impact or even maybe a medium impact. It comes up and, some conversations of, oh, what's your maximum token? Then I usually, as you just said, I kind of go into, well, how are you really using the data? Is it more of a RAG pattern that you're going against versus, trying to stuff everything into one
Exactly. I mean,
context window?
as a user, how many times, like as the user of whatever app you develop, they don't have the underlying data. They are going to interact with the app or the bot, whatever you create, and the data is on the other side. That would be used as a RAG. It only makes too much difference when the user themselves have a lot of information and they can actually paste all of that and put that into the context window, right? So that way, but that is not the generally the model, and that's why I think that's the reason why it didn't really catch on, because it's not practically usable for everyone. Well,
Yeah, I
the
would
other
agree.
thing and the other thing is also, I thought that it was funny that in the Google Gemini, what I felt was that, like this, they call it thinking model. I felt that it was a little bit of a uh, glitch in the branding, because you want to call something thinking. So what does that other model mean? Like non-thinking? Uh, Deep thinking is okay, because deep thinking means you are actually saying, okay, now it is going deeper in the thinking.
Going further, yes. Yeah.
Thinking, right? So it's just funny that I find that you should not call just thinking, right? Call it deep thinking model.
Yeah. Never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, what else, Jamie? We did not talk about agent much so far. Without that, I can't digest my food.
Yeah, so let's get into agents since we, haven't really talked about agents yet. So, big announcement from Microsoft just yesterday. Again, we're recording this on February 7th. So, on Thursday, February 6th, Microsoft announced the tooling for its agent service through a user interface, or what is called Foundry Studio. So this is, again, it's in a public preview form. It's not generally, quote unquote, it's not meant for production yet, but this is a platform that is designed, again, for organizations to develop a business automation capability tied to agents for tackling any of those use cases. So think of it this way: these agents can automate manual, time intensive processes. And the end goal is really to enhance productivity as well as efficiency of those teams. So, some key features of what this thing is. Let me bring up this. So, a key feature really is the ability for a person, I'm going to call it a maker. It could be a developer, it could be like a power user, however you want to define it. I'm going to say a maker, but someone's going to make an agent. And when you make an agent, you can connect into existing knowledge. You can connect into tools. As an example, that tool could be like Code Interpreter. There's going to be other capabilities of connecting into other tools over time, and or doing things like connecting into data sources, databases. So with this agent capability within the Foundry Studio, you'll be these makers are going to be able to build these agents that could also then be coupled with other agents. So constructing these multi-agent orchestration, or multi-agent agentic systems. Now, that orchestration actually happens outside of the Foundry Studio. You would need a tool like Semantic Kernel, LangGraph, or AutoGen. Pick your flavor for what you want to do with orchestration. But the key point here is you got to start with an agent, and you got to start with that somewhere. So the notion is I could start to construct these agents now within this UI. So definitely a step forward for the Microsoft agentic world. I mean, there's many different ways of building agents. Obviously, we talked about developing the agents via code through Visual Studio Code, leveraging the SDK, or software development kit, which has been out for about 2 months roughly. But now this brings in another set of quote unquote tools within the arsenal to build these agents, and theoretically building it a lot easier.
Good. I think this took I think a little bit time. I think it was announced at the Ignite, and then was supposed to be available, I think, the beginning of the new year, and it took a little bit longer, maybe a couple of weeks longer than it was expected.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was, if you had been following some of the Microsoft roadmap slides, which they put out, it was slated somewhere towards middle of January, about 3 weeks late, so to speak. So not too far off from a development standpoint. But again, this is in preview, so people that have been, that are on Azure, using Azure, and leveraging the Azure AI Foundry, you'll be able to use it. I'll show a quick little demo on what it is. It's pretty easy to look at. Before I get to that, I do want to again mention like what is this agent service. I kind of highlighted before. I mean, there's obviously built-in enterprise class readiness for obviously things like operations, the observability, support for security around this. There's also things that you could bring your own data to align with these agents. But at the very core, these agents can tie into knowledge, whether or not that knowledge is files that you provide to it and have Code Interpreter be able to leverage over it, or maybe it's using data that's coming in from an Azure AI search and that index that's built. Maybe it's coming directly against SharePoint or Microsoft Fabric, or maybe even grounded with a Bing search that it can go pull and grab current information. So that's a knowledge piece. So you can inject that directly into an agent. But the more important thing is you need an agent to take an action. So these agents can tie back into something like Azure Functions, Logic Apps, or the OpenAI specification. The other important thing too is that this can tie back into the Foundry catalog, which, yes, it could tie into the OpenAI models, things like GPT-4o, 4o mini, and obviously other models as time progresses with OpenAI. But it could also tie into the other models that are within the catalog, things like Llama, things like Mistral, things like Cohere. And again, this will be expanding over time as well. So when we talk about, or when you hear the Azure AI agent service, these are the things that it can do, or the capabilities that it has within it today, as well as then those that are coming over time. So with that, let me kind of just share out a screen and show you real quick what this thing could do.
And as Jamie pulls that up, those who already work in the Microsoft and Azure world, remember that this is a pro code way of doing things. You can also build agents in the Copilot Studio, which is where you build like in a low code way. And then you can extend them in the Foundry as well. But this is not the only way to build the agents, right? Of course, the low code way allows you quick but limited ways of doing things.
Yep. So I just popped into the Azure AI Foundry. So without going through all details, I've got a hub. So you need a hub and you need a project. I've already established those. So I'm in my quote unquote standard projects called the AI Studio project demo. But what you notice here, there's a new thing that now came into this UI. And again, if you have been using this, you know that this was not there until yesterday. So now there's this thing called agents. So when I click into the agents, I'm going to be able to see my agents that have been created. All right. So um, you could see, um, yeah, I probably want to rename this agent anyway. It's going with weather. Let me just change this into financials. So nice name. And I think I just spelled financials wrong, but that's okay. So I've got an agent name. I'm telling it what model to use. And again, this is tying back to any of the models that I have within my project. Models, again, is the LLM. And I'm giving it some instructions. All right. So the other thing, other than the instructions, I could give it some knowledge. Like, again, am I going to ground this with Bing? Am I going to go to AI search? These obviously bring up wizards that I connect into that data. The code interpreter, I already connected code interpreter. So if I say add, it's going to say, yeah, I'm already got right now. Again, remember, this is in a preview, so there's going to be other actions added over time. So I've already added in the code interpreter, but I could add files into the code interpreter. You can see all the different types of files that I could throw in as well. So think of this, it's not necessarily RAG, but you're providing data that the code interpreter would actually use in its analysis. So that's my agent that I've just created. Now, if you know things about agents, there's this whole thing. It's managing memory for me. It's got threads, and then it's got the messages that are there within the thread. Now, what I could do with this is I could actually open this up in the playground. So it's going to open up my agent for me, and I could talk with it like I normally talk with any chat, if you will, for dealing with the large language models. I have a prompt. So I'm going to say, please create a bar chart, operating profit. So I'm giving it some of the data. Theoretically, if I was connecting into my own data, I could go back into that, Azure Search Index, connect that up with a database or Fabric, whatever your heart's content. But in this case, I'm actually just going to let it go off of that data. Now, what you're going to see is this agent's going to be smart enough to know that, all right, this is connected or should be connected to the code interpreter, and code interpreter is going to take over and then create the things that it needs to do. So it's actually creating some logic, some code. You can see some of the things here. It's going to import the math plot lab, and it's building this up right now. It's building my font cache. This is interesting. And there you go. So it just built the a chart for me based off of this data that I told it, and it did that through this agent. Now, yes, this is a very simplistic agent. I really didn't do too much. I didn't really take some action. But what I told it to do at its simplest core is I gave it some data and used the code interpreter capability to actually build this up. So in all full disclosure, I could have done this very simply, just using the OpenAI or assistance API, but the things that we're going to be layering in, or the things that Microsoft is going to be layering in for connecting into different actions, and then also that knowledge is what's really going to set this apart. And obviously, the other thing too is the deployment with the OpenAI's assistance API. You can only use a OpenAI model, but I could change this if I had different models in here. I could change it to like the Cohere or the Meta model that could be or would be used against this agent. So that is the Azure AI Foundry Agent Service UI in a couple minutes or less.
That's pretty powerful, actually. And you can build the content safety layer on top of this as well, Jamie. Will that be also integrated?
Yeah, so you got to remember where the content safety comes in. It comes in with your model that you've got deployed. So as long as you've, put some content safeties, and again, Microsoft has a default one, but you can define your own in terms of jailbreaking different content safety levels that may either lower or higher the default scenarios. But yeah, that's tied back into the model itself.
Cool. Looking forward to it. This is now available in the public preview now, Jamie, or is that a GA?
Yeah, public preview as of yesterday, February 6th. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. So with that, the one last thing I have to say is go Chiefs. Super Bowl is in 2 days. So
No way. I thought you were an Eagles guy.
oh no. I'm not either, actually. I'm a Giants fan, but my wife is a Chiefs / Mahomes fan. So I guess I'm rooting for them this weekend.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I'm also neither guy, and I'm just gonna enjoy whoever plays best.
Well said. Well said.
Although Super Bowl is more fun when you pick a side,
Yes.
right? Okay. It was fun. Thank you, everyone. Jamie, have a good weekend and enjoy Super Bowl. Meet you all soon. Bye.
Likewise. See you later.